Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Promised Neverland manga review. This one's going to be for chapter 148, which is called We're Going Now. And I find this to be a pretty interesting chapter. It's not exactly what we expected, and what I think we expected was the Queen in action, the Queen versus Jiren, whatever Iverk is up to get a resolution on that. And I suppose in a way kind of almost like solved that plot point that most people assume Jiren will probably be killed by the Queen. But they don't really go that far with this plot here. They're more like, okay, we'll cover what Emma and Rhea have been doing the last few chapters to catch them up with what's happening in present in the castle. But you know, they just leave this at the most, you know, tantalizing point here, where like it's now been pretty much 2 chapters that we've been kind of waiting for the Queen to jump into action. But here, anyway, let's jump in and see what we get. So we see Jiren. I suppose after all of his morphing, he's pretty much back to kind of very, very close to the way he was in the past. He doesn't look really anything like one of the kind of wild beast demons anymore. By eating the nobles, he really has regained his previous good looks, I suppose, as he was noted as having. We see Iverk standing in front of the Queen, saying, you know, stand back, Your Majesty, as Norman and his forces kind of watch on. They note that there's only 2 more left, that being Iverk and Legra Valima. As you know, we have like Zazie and these other characters, you know, Vincent watching on. So Norman basically explains that the plan here is that move in, but don't interfere just yet, because the royal family is incredibly powerful because of the quality of the meat that they always eat. That means they're powerful, but they're also extremely intelligent. So we have to leave them until very, very last. So let Queen Legra Valima's and Jiren's forces fight it out until they're done, and then those remaining, us humans, will kill them. That's the plan, and that's pretty much all we get on this kind of Norman side of things, plus Jiren and the Queen. So the tease of like whatever Iverk is up to, why was he the one, the last of the nobles to be spared, plus us learning about the Queen's fighting abilities, we don't know about just yet. But they're teasing it. I assume that'll have to happen next week or the week afterwards. But then we cut to, on the end of this page, it seems like 2 random demons back in the capital city. But they take off their masks and it's revealed to be Emma and Rhea in disguise. So they've arrived at the capital. But as we get here, we're rewinding time slightly. So we're actually covering Emma and Rhea having more or less caught up to things. They've arrived. They're kind of on time, but they've arrived just a little bit too late. So we see them running through the capital. The ceremony is still going on. This is before anything has properly happened. The festival, it's already started. We ended up cutting it way closer than planned, and we'll find out why that is in just a second. And Emma and Rhea both wonder what's going on with Oliver's group, you know, because they had to leave them behind, obviously. They're just there on their own. And they note that Norman is most likely at the Tefari Assembly Hall inside of the castle. That's their goal. They have to head there through the town to get there. And as they're about to execute their sort of plan to persuade him and stop the strike to kill all the nobles and their families, this is when the explosions go off. So now we can sort of place in time where exactly this is. So they have arrived too late here. So they're too late to stop the destruction going on around them, as they notice just the damage that's been done to the area around them. They see like demon kids and civilians, you know, in terror basically because they've just been bombed. And yeah, Norman has already started his attack. As they turn around, they notice that, oh, it's Don and Gilda. They're also here, sort of also in disguise. So nice reunion between like our four main characters from Gracefield House. Really nice to get these 2 groups kind of joining up again. You 2 made it back safely. Because for Don and Gilda especially, like they were worried that like Rhea and Emma might never have come back, because obviously they basically just vanished. They did this weird ritual and just disappeared. So there was a chance they might not have come back. So very, very emotional and happy to see them again. Emma notes that, oh, it looks like Hayato is with you as well. So we see he's here. He has a smile on his face. So it looks like he's not their prisoner anymore. He seems to have like switched sides in all of this. He probably realizes that what Norman is doing is too extreme, that the other group is willing to support them but also stop the demons from being wiped out. And it made sense. I think Hayato's personality it feels right that he is on the right side of things here. He, having previously been loyal to Norman, understands Emma's perspective more at this point. So that's really cool. Gilda introduces Emma to Aishi. She's also there as well. And then she brings in Sanju and Mujika. So this is the reunion of Rei and Emma with Sanju and Mujika. Very, very nice here. The focus, of course, primarily being Emma and Mujika. They really set up a full page of setup leading to them hugging and their dialogue here. Mujika saying, "It's okay, thank you, all for the sake of us demons." And Emma reflects on just what Norman's plan was, just what she is doing to protect them, to save Sanju and Mujika, because Norman was also planning to kill both of them as well. So I'm so glad you're okay, and I'm glad you are too. We're absolutely going to stop Norman. They then ask, okay, you being here, does that mean that you did it? And she says, yes, we forged a promise with the One. And the reaction here is very interesting, because Mujika, who feels like one of the most important characters in all of this, because her blood is going to be so important, and just who she is, the kind of origin of why she has that blood is going to be very important. But her reaction to this is just like, happy. She's happy that Emma's accomplished this. No real reaction from her. But Sanji in the background kind of is like, huh? Like he has that, like he's just been like looking down, kind of reflecting on the situation. And then when he hears Emma say this, he's like, he kind of just looks up. They get that across in the panel here. So he is kind of this little bit of an enigma in all of this, because again, you remember back to like when they departed from each other like the first time, back relatively early in the series. He then revealed that he wanted things to improve for the humans so that they could get back on track, and it would be okay to hunt them again because they'd be actual prey once again. So if the humans have forged a promise again, that means his dream of being able to properly hunt humans again could be back on track. And I suppose the question here is, at what point will he decide that it's good to hunt again? And does his friendship with this group matter once he can accomplish those goals again or not? But either way. Then we get, just like hidden in one of these panels almost, Emma actually revealing something we didn't know before. She says to Gilda, "The fulfillment is being put on hold for now." And Gilda says, "All right, just as planned." So it's specifically, they're stating as a fact right now that the deal is agreed upon, what the promise actually is, but it won't be made reality until after a certain point. So I think the idea here is to stop Norman's plan, and once everything's stable, that's when the promise will actually be fulfilled. The reward will have to be given, whatever it is. So I think that is actually a really nice reveal. That is actually progression that I think we've been waiting for, that I'm glad they included here, of just like, okay, so that means that like the One isn't just like suddenly going to appear at any point in these chapters. It's specifically noted that no, he'll appear once everything's over. So that kind of means that, okay, we probably won't get the explanation of what's going on until a little bit later on, but at least we won't be sort of surprised with it. So I do like that. Then they kind of explain like, oh, like what about Oliver's group? They said they'd escort you with horses. Like what's going on here? And then we get the explanation for how did Emma and Rhea end up in the capital. We know they were on horses, but what happened? So 2 days earlier in the morning, Oliver stops everyone on their horses as they spot through the clearing the demon army heading out of the capital to obviously fight who they were obviously planning to fight. And they note that, yeah, they're heading in the opposite direction, so they're heading away from the capital. And they're like, wait, are they looking for our hideout? What's going on here? And Oliver decides that, okay, you two have to go off on your own. The rest of us, the Goldie Pond characters basically, we'll go back to the hideout and let everyone know. We'll make sure everyone's safe, that they don't find it, or we'll divert them or something like that. So Emma and Rhea are on foot from that point out. and that means that Emma and Ray will also have to take a detour around. So that's a good explanation for why the horses seem to get Emma and Ray back on track, so they should have arrived on time. But because of the detour, having to go the last section on foot, they arrived kind of on time, but like just at the deadline. So they've missed the explosion, they haven't been able to save all of the nobles, and realistically might miss most of the nobles being taken out. But they'll be there to, I suppose, have a confrontation with some combination of the Queen, Iverk, and Jiren, but we'll have to wait and see on that. So, that means that they're sort of discussing basically what's going on here. The army is bad news. This is surely just a fraction of them, and judging by the scale, it's probably the capital's army that Norman drove away. If they are, does that mean they saw through his plan? No, we can't know that yet, but if that giant horde discovers the hideout, it won't even compare to the damage that we suffered when the Ratri clan attacked. And they just have a little flashback showing the other kids, basically, the ones who would be at risk. So Oliver decides, you two head to the capital, I'll lead the rest of the group to protect everyone else. And then we cut back to the present day to catch up with, I suppose, share information, basically. So, Ray reveals to Don and Gilda a letter, and it has Norman's handwriting, and it says here, "This is a recipe for a poison that Norman made. He's most likely planning to use it on those in the castle and even the masses outside of it. So the first thing he's planning is wiping out the demons in the capital. But nothing has happened yet, but he already has it set up, so they have to get to him as quick as possible to mitigate the damage happening. And now that Sanji and Mujika are here, that becomes even more possible. That more damage will be done. So all of our lives should be a top priority, of course. If things start to look even a little bit dangerous, escape right away." And Sanju gives Emma the communicator, the transmitter that he got from Hayato, and just says that you're going to the capital. Once you're inside, call us, use the transmitter, and we'll come to you as soon as possible with help. And they have a way to communicate with each other, basically. So I think it's Mujika actually says, "Leave the outside of the castle to us, but if you guys are in trouble, just say something." And this is where the group, basically split apart. But on the final page, Gilda calls Emma back and says, "Actually, Emma, there's one more thing to say." And the writing's a little all wavy as like this. I don't really know what to describe what's happened, but everyone looks up to the sky. Something has happened. This kind of energy wave or something like that kind of engulfs the place. I don't know if they're trying to get across the idea that Norman has unleashed his poison at this point, or it's something else, like maybe the Queen's power or something like that. But she basically has something to say. It seems like maybe a little bit of time passes because suddenly Emma's not talking to Gilda anymore, but that obviously Gilda has just told Emma what she wanted to tell her. And then we get Emma remembering back to the time when Norman was sick and they had to use the two cups attached by the string to communicate through the door because they weren't allowed in when Norman was sick. And then Emma saying, "We're going now, Norman," as they're beelining it to the castle. And that's the end of the chapter. But what was the last page about? What are they trying to get at here? Now, one thing we do know, we've learned over the last couple of chapters, is that Norman is also sick. Now, we don't know if he's sick because he was experimented on in the same way that the Lambdas were, so he also needs that medicine and is dying because of it. Because we know that I think all the Lambdas, they won't live too long because the experiments have shortened their lifespan. That could be the case for Norman, but we also just in general about Norman know that he is weak, that he's the most intelligent of the group, but physically he is weak, and we obviously knew about this pretty bad sickness that he suffered from, which was the side story when we got it. And so I think those two things together almost give you the impression that does Norman have some sort of a disease or something like that even outside of Lambda experiments he knew he was ill, he was dying, and that something was going to happen anyway. So the question here is this what Gilda has told Emma here? It would make sense that maybe Gilda, Dawn, and everyone found out from Hayato, Jin, and the others that is the case, whether it be Lambda or just Norman in general and his health. But that I think there's a specific reason Emma remembers back to Norman sick during the one time we have seen him sick. And I think it's because Emma has now figured out that Norman is sick, and that this sacrifice isn't just revenge, it's him, using the last bit of his life left to accomplish something. And he doesn't mind dying because he knew he was going to die anyway, and that might inform some of his actions. So how exactly are they going to accomplish this if Norman is indeed, dying just from being sick? I think it's an interesting way to end it. It's sort of almost like confusing because they don't really explain it at all, and it obviously leaves it for that, like, the explanations to come out when Emma and Ray finally do meet up with Norman. That once they get to the castle, I think they will get an opportunity to speak to Norman to hash things out, and I think Norman revealing what's wrong with him and Emma being aware of it is going to be probably a factor that they have at play. And so in general, like, I think this chapter accomplished what it needed to. I like that we saw, like, two of our main groups meet up again. Mainly, Gilda's group meeting up with Emma's, and so Emma actually gets to meet up with Mujika beforehand, but they immediately split apart again because, of course, the main trio of characters meeting up is, like, the important thing in all of this. But we have their side of the story now. The setup, they're in the capital. Now we just need basically the next chapter to just cover their beeline from being in the capital city to the castle. I hope that doesn't take too long, in that I'd be perfectly fine if next chapter we just saw the Queen and Yverk versus Jiren and his forces. Whatever result that happens, Norman's crew comes in at the same time as Emma arrives. I think that's probably the way they'll do it. That I think Yverk is going to be killed and we'll get some resolution on his scheming, in that I think Jiren's revenge will mainly be directed towards Yverk, and then I think the Queen will probably kill Jiren and his forces, leaving the Queen as, like, the only, like, noble left. That's when Norma will ask everyone to come in and attack, and I think that's when Emma and Ray will arrive. So while Norman's lieutenants are fighting the Queen, I think that's when Emma and Ray will probably get their opportunity to speak to Norman and have their big talk and figure everything out. The question obviously is, after that, what do you do? Because if the Queen is fighting and potentially killing Norman's forces, and she seems unstoppable, who do you get to fight the Queen? And the obvious answer would be like, well, maybe Sanji, since he seems incredibly powerful, but then he might actually be, like, related to her and be on side with her. But because he's supporting Mujika, she seems like she's hated by the nobles. Maybe he also disagrees with that. So Sanju versus the Queen could be something. There's a reason they set up the transmitter, and the fact that Sanju isn't going in immediately. So I do think that Emma and Ray will be there. The Queen will be the ultimate threat, I think, in the end. So they'll have to call him in. And I think it will eventually lead to Sanju fighting the Queen in some form of a battle. How exactly it takes place, what the relationships are, because again, I think Sanju is going to have a lot of reveals come out about him, like what clan is he from, since he seems to be as powerful kind of as the nobles, and what's his backstory, how did he come to sort of meet up with Mujika? I don't think we were ever told that. So there's still a whole story with Mujika and Sanju to come out. But I think that's more or less how things are going to play out over the next little bit. When exactly the poison will come into play, if it's been activated now, I'm not sure. Because again, like that middle panel on the last page, the big long one, I don't really know what it's getting at. But like everyone's looking up at the skies as if something has just happened. I'm not really sure. It's a bit. It feels a little odd, just the last page and what they did, but. There's a lot of stuff happened here. Even Oliver's group, even the fact that Oliver's group is going to be the ones to protect everyone from the army that's outside of the capital is a kind of interesting one, that it gives those characters something to do, in that otherwise we have too many important characters at play here. But not the most eventful chapter, but it played the role it needed to, and it's gotten us to this point where I think we're dealing with some good content, I think, going forward. We have all the setup work, I think, is done. Once the next chapter isn't just Emma and Ray running through the capital, I think we should be okay. Because I don't think this manga is really about wasting your time. So I think pretty much the idea is that next time we see Emma and Ray, it'll be like maybe a panel or two of them right outside the castle, and then the next time we'll see them will be in the castle, in the scene that we've been waiting for, the big confrontation in there. But yeah, I think next chapter has to be the fight that they sort of teased for this week, we didn't get. I think it's going to have to be next week. So finally, stuff on the Queen should be interesting. And yeah, I suppose even the fact that they mentioned that we put the fulfillment of the promise on hold is a good thing to know. That just, you know, it's not going to happen any second now. After this event, basically, after this plan, and they foil this or whatever, that's when that will come back into play. So you have the intensity of all this stuff happening, who will survive, but then you also have in the aftermath of this, what is the sacrifice that will have to be made to accomplish the promise, is the thing that could, after maybe a triumphant victory for everyone, could be the real thing that brings everyone down again. But yeah, that's my thoughts on chapter 148 of the manga. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter. What do you think's going on? What's going to happen next? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.